Hello, this clip is designed to help you understand Work-Related Skills Unit 1 at an intermediate level. If this isn't the level that you're looking for, make sure you exit this clip and go into your appropriate level. The purpose of Work-Related Skills Unit 1, WRS, is to help you develop industry knowledge, understanding of OH&S, which is Occupational Health and Safety, and to develop confidence in applying for a job. This YouTube clip will go in concert with your booklet that you have, and these need to be completed. You will start with outcome 4, which is pages 1 to 7 of your booklet. In this, you do need to do industry research, but before you, workplace research, but before you start this, you do need to make sure you interview someone from that workplace. So you need to think about an industry where you have a contact or where you're comfortable enough to make a contact so that you can interview somebody. All right. Page 1 requires you to use 3 different sources and try and find employment opportunities within that workplace. So they're jobs within the workplace. It could be the cleaner, it could be an engineer, it could be the accountant, it could be the business owner themselves. But tell us what employment opportunities there are within that workplace. Use multiple sources to identify that. After that, you need to pick 3 of those employment opportunities that you found and identify what the workplace conditions are and the wage entitlements are, and you need to reference those. So in regards to workplace conditions, these are the conditions under which you are employed. So that would include the hours that you work in a week, the entitlements, the conditions that you have would also include how long you have to work before a break, your lunch break entitlements, sick leave, long service leave, that sort of thing. Wage entitlements would include not just the wage that you get, but also your superannuation and those sorts of things. So again, research 3 employment opportunities within that workplace. Then comes the interview that you need to do. The questions that you need to ask are listed on this interview sheet. So you need to make sure you ask those people. In the time of lockdown, these could be done over the phone or you could email them. It's entirely up to you, but that does need to be done. Alternatively, you could research a workplace where someone at home works there, so it makes it a little bit easier for you. Once that's done, you do need to prepare a presentation. This presentation needs to be presented with an element of ICT. Generally, that means people will do a PowerPoint presentation. If you want to use different ICT, that's fine. It's entirely up to you, but it does need to be done regardless. When this is done, you need to email that presentation, the PowerPoint, to us and a recording of you actually presenting it so that it can be done. To help you structure your PowerPoint presentation, I recommend you follow the criteria or the assessment that we're going to be using for you guys. So start with a cover page about what the workplace is, and after that, do a slide on employment opportunities within the workplace, workplace conditions, wage entitlements, and then the interview. If you cover that, you'll cover what you need to have. We will also assess you on your use of technology and your presentation skills. So that needs to go to a staff member and a peer, and you can get that feedback from them. On page 7, you need to do a self-reflection just on how you think you went in that activity. Once that's done, you're up to outcomes 1 and 2. In the booklet, they're from pages 8 to 27. You start with 2 separate OH&S readings about what OH&S is. For each of these, there's just 2 questions at the end. So the first one, what is OH&S? And then the 2 questions, important points that you've taken from that article and questions that you have. After that, occupational safety, why is it so important? And again, at the end, important points and questions that you have. After this, you need to research what a HSR is. A HSR is a health safety rep. Every workplace has one. In big workplaces, it could be someone's dedicated role. For instance, at the school, Mr. Morrison, the music teacher, is our HSR. In smaller businesses, generally the boss would be the HSR because they're in charge of the safety. But you, from 2 different sources, I recommend one would be WorkSafe. you need to identify what the HSR's role is, the HSR's powers, and the HSR's entitlements. This needs to be presented to a staff member and a peer, so just email it through and we'll give you some feedback. After that, you do need to look at the work safety regulator. In Victoria, the work safety regulator is WorkSafe Victoria, and I've given you their email address here. Their internet address, so that you can look on there. But using that and another source, so 2 sources total, you need to tell me what the work safety regulator's role is and the work safety regulator's powers. Again, the information you find need to be presented to a staff and a peer, so just email that through and we'll give you some feedback. After that, we're getting into the crux of OH&S itself, and you're introduced to the hierarchy of controls. This is on page 16. The hierarchy of controls introduces different methods of making things safe. The most effective at the top is elimination, down to the least effective as PPE or personal protective equipment. What you need to do is tell me what you think is meant by risk management. This you should be able to do off the top of your head. After that, you need to come up with some examples of what you think would constitute each of the levels of the hierarchy of control, starting with elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. This then needs to be presented to a staff member, so just email it through so that we can have a look at it. From page 18, you need to research and describe what effective consultation about health and safety matters between an employer and employees might look like. And there's some questions for you there. So you do need to use multiple sources. Make sure you use at least 2. But the question is at the top, what does effective consultation about health and safety matters between an employer and employees look like? Tell me your source and the information you found. Again, at least 2, and summarize that in your own words so that you can consolidate what you've learnt. After that, another question, what are the duties placed on the employer in relation to notifiable incidents? Again, at least 2 sources and summarize in your own words. This needs to be presented to a staff member and a peer, so once again, email it through, get some feedback. Very simply after that, you need to think of a workplace that you're aware of. It could be the school, it could be somewhere else, it's up to you, part-time job, where you're doing work experience, whatever. But you need to identify OH&S signs, tell us where they are, and explain what they mean. Need at least 3. Just draw the picture or take a photo of the sign, tell us where it is and what it means. After that, you're introduced to a thing called the risk matrix. This and the hierarchy of controls are going to be very important for you to later create a risk assessment. So the risk matrix tells us how risky something is. It's a combination of the consequences of something happening. So fatality is obviously very bad, all the way down to negligible injuries, and the likelihood of that incident happening. So from very likely all the way down to highly unlikely. The intersection of the 2 tells us how risky the activity is. All right. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail when I show you how to do a risk assessment. Page 22, though, is asking you to prepare for your risk assessment. You need to think about what you need to do to fix an unsafe activity. Write that down on page 22, email it to us. Once that's done, you're up to your risk assessment itself. There's spaces for 4 risk assessments for you to do. You only need to do a risk assessment for each of the things that you believe are relevant to make your activity safer. So I'll talk you through this using the example of someone building a deck as a project, and the safety issue is that there's uncovered holes for the foundations. So we would start with the risk. The risk is that there is a trips hazard because of the hole in the ground. Detail of the risk: holes have been dug for a foundation and they are dangerous. How's it identified? I saw it. Potential impact: people could injure themselves quite severely. After this, you need to look back to the risk matrix on page 21. This asks us to look at the consequence. I would suggest a consequence for tripping in a hole and hurting yourself could be a major injury. After that, we need to look at the likelihood of that happening. It's probably very likely. As a result, the risk rating is a combination of very high and major injuries, which means our risk is high, and we would write that there. Once that's done, we need to identify a risk treatment strategy. So what is it we're going to do? I'm going to put up a temporary fence. The responsibility is Mr. Coombs's, and the timeline is as soon as possible. As a result, we look at the residual risk, so the risk that's left over. The consequence, if someone's to trip in that hole, even though it's fenced, is still a major injury. But the likelihood of that happening is now highly unlikely. So we need to look at the intersection of them. Major injury, highly unlikely, means the risk is now medium, and we would write that in there. What you should see is that the risk rating here has lowered to here. If that's the case, you know your activity is going to be successful. You need to do that for as many items as you think are necessary to make your activity safe. That's why there's 4 there. You don't have to use 4. Once this is done, you need to go to page 25 and interpret and evaluate the findings of the risk assessment and make possible suggestions for improvement. So, what is your interpretation and evaluation of your risk assessment plan? So, how did you take it? Do you think it's going to be effective, etc.? As a result, what are at least 3 possible suggestions for improvement or hazard control measures for your activity? So put the temporary fence up, put a sign up, etc. And then you need to analyse each of them below. So analysing is just asking you to look at positives and negatives of the measure. So the temporary fence, a positive could be it's easy to do, and we have the materials. The negatives are you might need 2 people to do it. The feet at the bottom of the fencing are quite heavy, and if you don't have the materials, it's quite costly. Then summarise that in an overall reflection. You do this for each of the 3 measures you found, and you present this to a staff member and a peer. Again, just email through what you have found. Page 28 to 35 requires you to complete outcome 3. This is where you have to make an OH&S activity plan. That OH&S activity should be one in relation to the risk assessment you've just done. So it's no longer theoretical, you actually need to put it into place. So if it is to put up the fence, you need to tell us that the location of the complex OH&S concern, the VCAL building. Possible solution, put up the temporary fence, put up a sign, etc. I'm going to choose putting up a fence because it's going to be the most effective. I then need to fill in this table. Who are the people involved? What is their role? Explain their role. Explain their level of responsibility. Tell me their level of responsibility and then explain it. So Mr. Coombs' role is to supervise. Explanation of role, he's going to supervise the setup of the fence, make sure it's done properly. His level of responsibility is high because he needs to make sure it's done properly. Joe Blogg's role is to be the lackey, and he does what he's told. His level of responsibility is low because he is just doing exactly what he's told. Once that's done, you need to tell me your plan to do this activity in clear steps. Assume we know nothing. So break it down into as many steps as you can. Get this approved. When you're getting it approved, it is very important, if you're doing it at home, to make sure you get teachers to say that that's okay and it's sophisticated enough. Once that's done, tell us an expected timeline. So how long is it going to take for you to do that actual activity? Page 30 asks you to look at the advantages of teamwork and the disadvantages of teamwork in your OH&S activity. Just write those down and present that to 2 peers and a staff member. Again, just email it through. Once this is done and you have approval to do your activity, you just simply have to do the activity. There's work diaries for you from page 31 onwards. It's very simple. You just need to tell us what your plan was for today, what actually happened, what would you do differently or refine, so what would you change, how did working in a group help or hinder you, distance education wise, it might be a case of you working with family, and then an overall reflection. You just need to do one of these for each day that you do physical work. And because we need to authenticate your work, we also need you to make sure that you are taking some photos and sending those through, just so that we can prove that you have done the work that you said you were going to do. Page 34 is an OH&S activity evaluation. So you just tell us what went well, do you need to improve on, what you need to celebrate, any issues, and if so, how were they overcome? Was there anything unexpected? If so, how did you deal with it? List the outcomes that were achieved and anything else for consideration. Fairly cruisy. You then need to get a peer review. If you're at home, just get a family member to do it. And then you need a staff member review. There's a community member reflection. We'll leave that for the time being. We'll come back to it if necessary. The last thing that you need to do is to complete Outcome 5. Outcome 5 is designed to get you to find and apply for jobs so that you are getting used to it, and when you do it for real, it's not as daunting as it might seem now. So firstly, identify a job ad. Seek.com is a good one. A job that you're interested in, put the job ad here or just keep a URL so that we can find it. Once that's done, you need to look at different resumes and cover letters and find the positives and negatives for each one. I would just look online, type in resume, type in cover letter, put the source, so the URL, and then the positives and weaknesses of that resume. You need to do 3 of those. And then finally, analyze what are the best features you'd like to put into your resume and tell me why. Do the same for a cover letter. So again, 3 of them, positives and negatives, and then analyze what you're going to put into yours and why. Once this is done, you need to make your resume and cover letter specifically for the job that you have found. That should respond to specific criteria that the job is asking you for instance, a work ethic, interested in the industry, etc. In your cover letter, you need to make sure you address those. When that's done, send it both through and get some feedback for those. The last thing you need to do on that is reflect what you're going to change for next time. Work-related skills unit 1 is designed for you to complete in 4 weeks. This should be done 3 times throughout the course of the first term and a half to allow you to successfully complete Work-related skills unit 1. In the first term, they were 4 weeks, so you should have completed 2 by the end of term 1. The final time should be completed by the end of week 5 in term 2. As always, if you have questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact us and we will help you where possible. In the meantime, stay safe.